Welcome into episode 33 of Uncaged Sports Talk. On this St. Patrick's Day edition, I have a special guest on this episode, Dan Steenkamer. I'm gonna introduce in a second, bring him in a second. But welcome in on this St. Patrick's Day edition. We're gonna go over some NFL free agency moves, go through all the teams, and to close out the show, I'm gonna do a Luke's list of what I think are the biggest free agency moves. I think the list is kind of hard to disagree with. They were all big moves and could have really good payoffs, like huge implications for the team. But without further ado, here is Dan Steenkamer. Welcome back to the show. How have you been?
Luke, it's great to speak with you on here. Great to be here for an episode number that's in the 30s on your program. I mean,
Yeah,
I just think back to you getting started, and you're well past 2 dozen episodes, pushing toward 3 dozen,
well
right?
past
So it's awesome to be here.
over
It's great
half a
to see
year.
you again, and happy St. Patrick's.
Happy St. Patrick's Day. Before we get into some NFL talk and NFL free agency talk, you were down in DC this week covering Delaware men's and women's basketball. How was that?
Yeah, it was a great experience to be down at the Coastal Athletic Association conference tournaments, like you referenced, men's and women's basketball for the University of Delaware, competing down there in Washington D.C. at the Washington Mystics home arena. So it's a WNBA venue that really is well
The home of
sized
Elena
and
Deladon.
home of Elena Deladon. Yeah, I mean, I called it Deladon City down there, seeing her picture up in the concourse at the arena. But it was a relatively shorter stay than Delaware would have liked in both brackets. Men's basketball did win one game to move into the quarterfinals of the bracket, and women's basketball fell to Drexel in the second round in really close, heartbreaking fashion for that program at Delaware. So all in all, as much as WVUD Sports and the reviews coverage would have loved to have more and more games to do with the Blue Ants participating, it was still a good time. I always call it kind of
Yeah,
like a family reunion, seeing all the different conference members and their students who cover the different teams and all being in one place. It's a pretty good time.
yeah, that sounds like it was a very fun time. Before we get into some NFL talk, I wanted to ask or just bring it up. Temple is about to be playing. They're actually starting right now. They're on an insane run for March Madness, or
Yeah, the Owls, and they've been embroiled in
for their
controversy
conference
too.
tournament to go to the NCAA tournament. They're on an
Yeah, the
insane
American
run.
Athletic.
Yeah, an 11 seed, the first ever 11 seed to make it to the American Athletic Championship. That's insane. St. Joe's was on a run, just keeping it local. They were on a run and lost to what? Who did they lose to again? I'm drawing a blank right now.
That A10 men's bracket has been
They
really
lost
something
to
else.
VCU, didn't they? Yeah,
St.
VCU.
Joseph's and VCU, I want to say that was a matchup.
Yeah, and VCU just lost to Duquesne, I think is how you say it.
Duquesne, yeah,
But yeah, Duquesne,
the
my
Duquesne
bad.
Dukes. Got to put some
Duquesne.
respect on their name, literally.
Yeah, VCU just lost to Duquesne, and St. Joe's had lost to VCU. The other local team was 4 points away from their second ever NCAA tournament bid. Del State was lost by 3 points. They just needed 4 more points, and they were heading to the NCAA tournament for the second ever time, for
Yeah,
the first time
the,
since 2005.
the Hornets really
I
put
didn't
a
even know what
scare
the
into
tournament was
the
back
MEAC
then.
as a possible Cinderella, man.
That would have been huge. They would have been a 16 seed probably, but that would have been
Oh
cheering
yeah.
them on.
Oh
Even
no,
though they're a
DSU would
rival
be a
of
great
ours.
rooting interest.
Yeah, even though they're a rival of ours at Delaware, it's you got to support the local teams when they do get in.
Oh, there's
It's
no doubt
just like
about
with
it. I would have been glued to a Delaware State NCAA tournament
yeah.
game, probably in the first four. I would have been way more interested if Del State were in the mix, even in that way.
It's just like with the Big Five in Philadelphia.
Yep.
They hate each other like during the regular season, but when it comes down to it, they're gonna root for each other no matter what when it comes down to trying to get into the NCAA tournament. It's just like you got to support the local teams.
Yeah, push comes to shove, and at least when it comes to the 302, when it comes to Delaware, I think most Delaware people get behind anything Delaware tied most times because it's not often that you get to see a direct Delaware representation on the national stage.
Mhm. I wanted to touch on those things a little because it's big topics coming up this week with the March Madness coming up this week. I know I cannot say that. I'm not allowed to say that, but I doubt they're gonna crack down on this little rinky dink podcast.
Well,
But
don't sell yourself too short now, Luke. I mean, you've been going for a
well,
little bit. You've been going for a little bit.
I, I doubt they would even my podcast would even come up in their like searches when they're trying to crack down on it. If they do, I doubt my podcast is even coming up in their search.
Also, at least the more and more discussion of it, the better. Not that it's not already a hugely popular event, but I think you'll be in
Yeah,
the clear.
yeah. It's just like, you know, you're not even allowed to say Super Bowl.
Well,
I've
certainly, unless
been
you're paying for it. If it's a commercial presentation, if it's an advertisement,
it,
you better have an official partnership kind of deal.
like when I was looking it up, I was like, you can't even say Super Bowl. Like that's trademark too. Like everyone says Super Bowl though. Like they're never gonna crack down on that.
Well, what would be
I
the end
I
game
remember.
too, right? Like as a business
Yeah,
matter, like there wouldn't even be an end game to pursuing that at that volume. Yeah.
yeah. Like you would have to crack down on thousands of podcasts.
The
Now March Madness, it's easier just to say NCAA tournament, but Super
big
Bowl, like what
dance.
else is the person gonna say?
Yeah, I mean the big dance,
M-
the spring
yeah,
shindig.
the NCAA tournament just has so many other names you can use. Without further ado, though, we're gonna get into the NFL free agency reaction. We're gonna go team by team, give our thoughts on each team, and here we go. Starting with the Arizona Cardinals, I want to hear. Do you have any like big takeaways from their moves so far in free agency in the opening week of free agency?
Well, the Cardinals are in a franchise that's in a bit of a unique transition because Kyler Murray coming off of injury. So,
Hmm.
I think people are easily inclined to forget about the Cardinals, but it's the NFC. It's pretty top heavy. If the QB is healthy and Murray is a QB who, when healthy, he is dynamic and can be an absolute game changer and headache for defenses, then you got to consider Arizona being part of the mix. But not that these moves by themselves are going to make anything jump off the page. They probably need to do pretty well in the draft to round out and solidify the rest of the roster, of course. But Bilal Nichols on defensive line being signed by Arizona, certainly that's a familiar name to us as a Delaware alum. There
Hmm.
is Nichols, and then Desmond Ritter being traded for by Arizona.
It was
It's kind
only
of
a seventh
interesting.
round pick, I think, too.
Yeah, Ritter obviously didn't pan out with the Falcons. I'm not sure that he was drafted in an appropriate position or really in the right situation. That's not to say the
Yeah.
Falcons didn't have a lot of offensive weapons by the time all was said and done, but we know the Falcons made a coaching change as well, and so it was pretty inevitable that given the number of veteran quarterbacks and starter level quarterbacks who were shifting around and available this offseason, it wasn't as if Ritter was going to have a realistic chance to stick around, even as much as folks thought maybe Kenny Pickett might stick in Pittsburgh at least to compete. Ritter wasn't really going to be given that chance to compete after having the sample size he's had with the Falcons. And so moving on to Arizona, getting a chance to be behind Kyler Murray, it's not as if Mitch Trubisky, when he backed up Josh Allen in Buffalo, it's not like Trubisky's career really made that drastic a turnaround, but Ritter definitely was deserving of another opportunity elsewhere, get the change of scenery and not exactly be bounced from the league or anything like that. Let's
Yeah.
just see if he'll either wind up on that career backup
Wh-
trajectory or if he gets another opportunity with an often injured Murray, maybe he'll find a way to turn things around.
When he was coming out of college, he was actually a QB I was high on like 2 years ago. I was actually
Yeah.
high on him coming out. I was like, he has potential. Like watching him, he had potential. And for a seventh round pick for a backup, I would take that in a second. You can easily turn that into something better. If Kyler goes down for 2 games, Ritter comes in, has 2 really good games. You trade him for a fourth round pick.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. It's basically taking a seventh into a fourth, right?
yeah, it's that simple. It can be that simple.
Yeah.
With the other
And
moves they made,
yeah.
what was that?
I was just gonna say too, like you liked Ritter out of Cincinnati. Easy to like a Cincy guy. You know, the Bearcats of Cincinnati. Their story in college football was really fun to follow in the FBS. So then you really want that to translate. You want Ritter to be a story and a headline going into the league, and it just didn't. He never was really a viable starter for the Falcons as much as they rolled him out there. So um, it's kind of an interesting spot because I don't know if there's going to be enough on the Cardinals' plate where they say if Murray has more injury problems going forward, it's not like Ritter's presence necessarily will make them shy away from looking at another quarterback in the draft. So I hope it works out for Desmond's sake, but hopefully this is a bridge in his career from one spot to another.
Looking through the rest of their signings too, it's the Jonah Williams. I think that's a good move. I think they made some solid moves for the most part. Jonathan Gannon's working there. He's got himself a good backup who can turn into something potentially, as we were just talking about with Ritter. You got Jonah Williams from the Bengals. They just brought in Jonah Williams for 2 years, $30 million. That's a decent signing there. You got Sean Murphy Bunting. He was a good corner for the Bucks. They've made some solid moves there, and you're most likely going to bring in Marvin Harrison Jr. as your wide receiver since you got rid of Hollywood Brown. Since Hollywood Brown's no longer there, Marvin Harrison's the wide receiver for Kyler Murray, and Ritter steps in, but
yeah, that's if necessary, of course.
They've had a solid offseason so far. Moving on to the Atlanta Falcons. There's one big one that jumps off the page here. I'll even highlight it if you're watching. This one. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, Kirk Cousins to the ATL. It's been so fun to see the social media content of Cousins with like the Dirty Birds chain and with his children and everything rocking the bling. And it's that's a cool, big Kirko, that whole meme and nickname and trend. But Cousins has really cashed in. That deal is big time for a guy who's going to be entering, just an older age as a quarterback by the time this 4-year deal is done. And also in the present term, he's coming off of a serious injury that he had that ended his time with Minnesota for all intents and purposes. So it's great for Cousins. I mean, he secured a bag that he should be able to give a good return on for the Falcons. Falcons, the way I look at this deal really is they just want to be relevant in the playoffs, squarely in the playoff mix, make the playoffs, and that could mean having won 11 plus games in the regular season. It's hard to say this is necessarily going to be a Super Bowl winning deal somewhere along the way, like within these 4 years of this contract. Are the Falcons going to be in play for that? Well, let's see how their defense looks, because I do think the offensive pieces, at least on paper, it's not like Cousins is falling off a cliff in terms of the support he has around him. Atlanta has some intriguing guys in the picture at the skill positions, but we have to find out about the head coach, which we will soon enough. Still, though, with having Cousins guarantees a certain sense of stability. Kirk Cousins has gone from being that guy in Washington who was, you like that, and it was kind of like a flash in the pan moment there a little bit, to moving on from being in Washington with the RG3 era. Cousins, his time with the Vikings, he became way more entrenched as, okay, yeah, he's a household name, not necessarily because it's elite top end talent, but because the completion percentage is good. He's probably a little bit slept on, probably lost a lot of attention that went to Justin Jefferson at the end, and for good reason. But all in all, it's a big headline for the Falcons because they've been lost at sea a little bit since the end of the Matt Ryan days. And really, even when they had Matt Ryan, it wasn't as if, Matt Ryan did have a peak year or two, but you have Shanahan involved in that as well. I think Cousins is a little more of an independent quantity. You're a bit sure of what you're going to get. And that's a good thing. Having a certain amount of security and confidence is a huge part of at least being able to go to sleep at night, spending the money you are at quarterback.
With this signing for the Falcons, I think it elevates them to where they should be able to come out of the NFC South as the NFC South winner. Desmond Ritter's the main person who held them back last year, and coaching. But you have Drake London at receiver. You signed Darnell Mooney. You traded for Rondale Moore. You have Kyle Pitts still. You have Bijan Robinson. And now you have Kirk Cousins. You built yourself a nice, solid offense there. Nothing like that's going to blow you out of the water. But it's an offense that's going to be in the upper half of the league, probably. An offense that's going to put up points, probably.
And I just look at the conference. They should be able to score. They should be able to score. Now, the Tampa Bay games will be interesting because the Bucs brought back a lot So Bucks versus Falcons should be good. The division should be less mediocre
That's
now.
what the
You would
division's
hope.
gonna come down to. It's Bucks Falcons, and that I could see that coming down to the last week of the year, most likely, because the Bucks still have weapons on offense. They still have Baker. They brought back Mike Evans, and the Falcons just loaded up on offense to a degree. It's not like when you say loaded up, you would think they got star power, but they did make significant improvements compared to what they had last year. All they had last year was really Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and Bijan. No really wide receiver two or anything.
Well, it's still
Now
pretty
they
darn
got
good
something
though
they can
on
work with.
paper.
Yeah,
It's still pretty good on paper. If Kyle Pitts can become the mega tight end that
he was at
perhaps
Florida.
the image we had in the draft, that if that comes to fruition, that would be something else. And Bijan Robinson's one of everybody's favorite young backs. So
Yeah. He helped me win a fantasy championship this year. Thank you, Bijan. He did not help a lot of people, but he helped me because I had a lot of depth. But moving on to the Baltimore Ravens, there's one that sticks out here. It's very obvious. I know you're a Ravens fan, so I'll let you go talk about this and talk about like their signing, the rest of their signings as well. Derrick Henry.
yeah, Derrick Henry, King Henry. The fact that the King is coming in as the Ravens lose Queen, Patrick Queen, sort of alleviates some of the blow of Patrick Queen moving places within the AFC North, heading over to the Steelers. But Derrick Henry, for as many injury issues as the Ravens have had at running back in recent years, I mean, you think about a guy that everybody in Baltimore really likes when he's healthy, and J.K. Dobbins is that guy. You want to have a monster at running back who is just an Iron Man. Derrick Henry's on the maybe older side in his career, obviously, but is still an absolute tank of a back. You won't find anybody exactly like him the way he runs, and he's going to pair really well with Lamar Jackson and giving Lamar Jackson even that much more of a threat to just complete the handoff or tuck it himself. You have to respect both players as a runner in their different styles of running. So it's really a perfect match, Derrick Henry with Baltimore, especially when you just think about stockpiling running backs. The Ravens would love to do that in addition to Henry after losing Gus Edwards in free agency here. So the injury bugs, like I said, has been a big deal, but having Henry as an unquestioned featured running back in whatever capacity that he can handle in the span of these 2 years on the agreement here, the money makes sense for the Ravens. 2 years at $16 million. That's good for both sides, and you can't overlook either re-signing Justin Madubuike on the defensive front because Madubuike has been a big hit, and having him locked up for 4 years is going to be very helpful. The Ravens continue to be an organization that has identity that's really prideful on defense, so that's no question something that's very helpful to have Madubuike a factor in there. And I don't think looking elsewhere at the skill positions on offense that losing OBJ is the worst thing in the world. Zay Flowers does have some question marks moving forward, but and so that's going to be something that needs to be looked at with a great deal of scrutiny, because if Zay Flowers is going to continue to mature and progress into a top flight wide receiver for the Ravens in the rest of the Lamar Jackson era, virtually, you just have to be absolutely sure of him on and off the field. But Odell Beckham, just at where he is at his age, was not going to be necessarily a top 3 guy for the rest of his career. So that's not the biggest. I mean, it's not the biggest loss when you have to make the money work somewhere. So it wasn't unexpected to lose Odell Beckham. And all in all, when you look at the overall composition of the Ravens, re-signings and signings here, bringing back Nelson Aguilar on 1 year at a relatively affordable price, that seems like that's a good move as well. So there's a lot to think that maybe this window that we had last season, speaking from a Baltimore perspective, it might not be tightened too much by what we've seen so far in the offseason, and that's certainly a positive sign.
The one thing for the Ravens, my takeaway, is the 2 losses on defense. Patrick Queen, before Roquan Smith came, wasn't living up to the hype before Roquan Smith came in, but he had a really good year this past year. Losing him, I think, might take a hit for the defense to a degree. And then Geno Stone. Stone was good in Baltimore for a bit. Losing him could take a hit. But I like the move of signing Derrick Henry, very much. It gives the Ravens offense another layer. They like a power football type of offense, and it gives them that type of power football, like true power football, when you got a running back like Derrick Henry back there. The
Yeah,
one
and
thing I the one thing I would say with Derrick Henry's running style, though, with Lamar Jackson, like, it's still gonna be dynamic having Derrick Henry back there, but Derrick Henry's more a power back. It's not like a read option type of back where you want him going to the outside. Derrick Henry, you want like going up the middle. He's the type of back you put in single back and you have him run between like this be up the middle and let him gain
yeah,
speed,
I
not from
I understand that
shotgun.
image. Yeah.
That's gonna hurt a little bit for him.
It could, but I just think that Henry really he can run. He he's still
Yeah,
better than most other running backs in the league to the point where he can really run most schemes. The only thing is I don't think he's going to be much of it in the passing game. They're not going to ask him to do too much in that.
yeah,
And maybe if you had your ideal choice of running back, maybe somebody like Saquon Barkley who could catch more passes would be a little bit more of a picture perfect fit. But it's splitting hairs, really, the way I see it when you
yeah,
bring up that kind of comp.
yeah. Derrick Henry, I think, is gonna make an impact on that team. It's King Henry. I actually will get more into that later on. I have that on Luke's list, as it's one of the biggest signings of the offseason. It almost seems like a match made in heaven, like this was meant to happen. It was either this or Dallas for Derrick Henry,
And I
and
don't
this
see why
just
you would
seems
want to
like a
go to
more
the Cowboys
perfect
at
fit.
all.
Yeah, this just seems like a more perfect fit for Derrick Henry in
You have
Baltimore.
a much better
Gets to
quarterback in
play with
Baltimore
Lamar
who's way less
Jackson.
dependent on any one running back, whereas Dak Prescott needs the line it just right, the running game just right. It's becoming I think it would be tiring
N-
for most of the people who are playing with Prescott, honestly.
Now, a question I'll ask though, to go along with like the memes and all. Are we sure that they're not signing him to be the quarterback? Because they already have a running back in Lamar Jackson.
Oh my
Are we sure
gosh.
Derrick Henry's not going to be the quarterback? Because he
You're
has
lucky I
thrown
don't
some
just leave the
touchdown
studio
passes
right
before.
now. You're lucky I don't just leave the studio right now.
No, I just had
Yeah.
to throw that in there.
Had to
I'm a
troll
fan
that
of Lamar
going in there.
Jackson. I had to throw that in there though.
Mhm. Mhm.
For the moving on to the Buffalo Bills, they have had a weird offseason so far. Nothing like no big signings, but they cut a lot of people trying to create cap room. Brought in Curtis Samuel, which doesn't really move the needle. Nothing here moves the needle for me, except for the fact I think over the last 2 days or so, they extended Josh Allen, I think, which freed up some cap room. So this has just been an off season of trying to free up some cap room and trying to rewrite basically the team, trying to completely retool the team when you're cutting people like Jordan Poyer, Mitch Morris, Naeem Hines. Naeem Hines wasn't anything really great to write home about, but Tre'Davious White, you're releasing people like that. That's you're doing it almost complete retool, which
Well, the
is
Bills,
kind of needed there in Buffalo.
yeah, they needed to get introspective like this, and I mean, not just the spreadsheet tells how the dollars and cents add up. That matters. Like that's just inescapable. You had to address that with the number of released players we're
Mhm.
looking at here, but also the Bills had to get pretty real with themselves about what are going to be the hard decisions to make to free up the most flexibility to reimagine ourselves enough to actually take down the Chiefs. And
Yeah,
so, as much as they give the vibe of hitting a wall in the AFC postseason against Kansas City, there have to be changes. There have to be changes. And one of these off seasons, there's a risk where it could be Sean McDermott who's facing that change, him with his own position,
he could be on a
which it
hot
would
seat this
be
season coming up.
a situation where it's not as if McDermott is not seen as a quality coach to some extent, but as much as the roster gets shaken up here a bit with the number of released players and not a ton of high profile moves yet, it feels like the Bills have to behave this way in a sense of keep making tweaks. You can't don't stay too stagnant when
Yeah,
the Chiefs find a way to find different ways to win. The Chiefs won a completely different style of postseason this past completed season, and so the Bills are still looking for that winning formula. And as generic as that says to say, or as that sounds to say, it's the called out truth for them. So
yeah.
I'm not even as
Looking at
interested in the Bills free agency as I am in their draft because you hit on a few young guys in the draft and they're come at cheap labor basically, and then you might be able to turn things on their head a bit in the playoffs because the Bills should be right back there. The division is no
Yeah.
good, but it's definitely a matter of none of this will be able to be evaluated with all that much intensity until we get to next January and we see
Yeah.
what the next Chiefs Bills outcome looks like.
This seems like they're doing like almost changing of the guard. They're like, okay, this variation of our team that we have right now is
Yeah.
not good enough. We need to retool. Like, even if like it seems like they're almost throwing in a towel maybe for next year. Like, I wouldn't say
Well,
throwing in a towel for next year
that doesn't make any sense,
exactly,
Luke, respectfully. What? Throwing in the towel? They have
but
Josh Allen at quarterback. How
it seems like they're taking like this year as just like a try to get your team right year. Like, use
you
the
have Josh
draft.
Allen in
You're
his
gonna
prime
get
and you're just trying to get your team right?
you're
There's no
you're
way.
gonna
There's
get
no way.
you're gonna get comp picks for Jordan Poyer most likely because you're gonna get like a third or fourth round comp pick for Jordan Poyer. Trey White, when he does get signed, eventually he'll get you like a fifth round comp pick in the following
Right, but that's
draft.
but I understand that, but what how does that make the Bills a team that's not
Because
really
like you said, it's a realization that you haven't beat the Chiefs over the last few years,
that's not like
and
you
you
were far
need to
off though.
do
I'm saying
something
they need to get
completely
over the
different.
hump, but it's not like they've been miles away from KC either.
Well, the indication the moves here that they made, like it indicates to me that they're like, okay, we need to. It's a reality check. We need to make changes here.
But it's
Like,
happening. It needs to happen
it's
quickly
stale at
because you're
this
trying to
point.
do it within the span of Josh Allen having just prime Allen talent and ability before he gets too banged up and looks like end of career Big Ben, with the way he runs, right?
Yeah,
Like,
I agree with that, but with like how they're indicating to me
okay.
that this year isn't gonna be what it's been in the past for them. Like, it's not like like a white flag year, like they're just waving the white flag, but it might not be a 12-5 Bills team. It could be an 11-6, maybe 10-7 type of year. Try to
But
get your
that would
team
still mean
right
they're
for
in
the
the
following
playoffs, and with
year.
Josh Allen in the playoffs, you got a chance. Like, I don't think
Yeah,
they're
Josh
I
Allen will
don't
give
I
them a
don't I don't
chance.
agree that they're signaling any goal that's short of the AFC Championship win.
Yeah, I agree with that too. They're trying to get where they still want to. They want to get to the Super Bowl, which has been their goal with Josh Allen. It just seems like they know that it's gotten stale and
Right.
they
So
need
let's
to
see who
make
they can bring in off of
changes.
some of this freed up.
Yeah, they know it's gotten stale and they need to make changes. Like, this is like a changing of the guard type of year, a big off season for their future is what I was more trying to get at. It's like a
Yeah.
big off
No, well
season for
that much we
where
can
they
settle
want to
on,
get to.
especially with Joe Burrow coming back for the Bengals.
And with you're gonna get the comp picks for some of these players in the next off season. 2025 is a year where they're probably truly looking at as a Super Bowl team. Just because the comp picks they're gonna get a lot more draft picks, a lot more draft capital. You're gonna have more cap space releasing some of these people. That's the year that they're, I think, truly aiming for with some of these moves. But for the most
I think the best
part,
way to say it is no later than 2025 because
yeah,
if you're too focused on 2025, you're overlooking a whole 24 that has like there's well
yeah,
over 3/4 of the league that would trade in their QB for Allen. So you you can't completely look past 24, but that probably is pretty obvious to to most folks.
yeah. They're not completely looking past it. I just think that they're gonna be they've gotten stale over the last few years. Like, their biggest problem's been no running back recently, and not like they don't have a lot of depth all over the place. Like, they're a solid team, but they don't wow you anymore. They've had the Stephon Diggs problems recently with Josh Allen. Josh Allen and
Yeah.
Stephon Diggs had some problems this past year. It just seems like a reality check type of offseason for them. Like,
Yeah,
the
well,
rubber
it's also
meets
the way
the
they're being
road type
perceived.
of
They're not as much of the
season.
trendy team, the upstart,
Yeah.
"Oh, Buffalo's good now." It's like, well,
Like
now we're not saying, "Oh, wow, Buffalo's good," and that's all a great story. It's when will Buffalo be great? And so
like what you said with Sean McDermott, this is almost a he's on the hot seat type of year. Like, if they don't get over a hump that they want to this year, if they don't make improvements in the postseason this year, Sean McDermott could be gone. People are actually talking about him being fired this off season. There was talks about that at one point. But Josh Allen is going to be one of those coaches that you don't get where you want. It could be time for you to go. A changing of the guard in Buffalo. Moving on to the Panthers.
Oh gosh.
There's nothing much to say about this. There's two moves basically to talk about with them. Brian Burns to the Giants. They traded him for like a 4th and 7th, I think. 4th and 6th, if I'm not mistaken. When last year they could have gotten 2 firsts, they were offered 2 firsts for Brian Burns last year, and this year they traded him for a lot less. That's just bad. That's just bad on the Panthers' part. It's a bad front office there in Carolina. Not much else from my opinion to talk about. Yeah, bad ownership there. He's the reason they took Bryce Young, their owner. David Tepper's the exact reason they took Bryce Young when they could have had CJ Stroud, the Rookie of the Year. But
I'm not gonna bang on him for just a Bryce Young pick. I think there are a lot of people who were intent on Bryce Young ahead of CJ Stroud, so it's easy to get the top 2 quarterbacks mixed up. But if you actually get pieces like Deontay Johnson, a wide receiver, the traded
is a good move.
Asset that Carolina brings in, that's a little bit interesting because it's not like he was some scrub with the Steelers or anything like that. That's a little bit interesting. But the fact that move is what actually moves the needle on here compared to all this other negative energy around the Panthers, it's just that's not enough to make me feel all that inspired about their chances, even being in a mid division.
This is just like a mid free agency for the Panthers. I'll use the word that you just used, mid.
What does deserve another highlight, if you're going to handle it on the screen share, Luke, is Robert Hunt at guard getting 5 years and $100 million. That's a huge payday for a lineman in front of Bryce Young. So that is something that's worthy of mention.
2 linemen. Seems like they really believe in their guards. They're trying to keep the O-line intact. They're the guards that they just signed. They're trying to build the O-line for Bryce Young there. Trying to build around Bryce Young, which I respect. The Deontay Johnson trade should help Bryce Young a little bit, gives him a weapon to work with. Last year, his best weapon was the rookie receiver. I forget what's his name? Shoot. Why am I drawing such a blank? I should know this off the top of my head. I had him in Jonathan Mingo.
Yeah.
And they had Thielen as well. Like their 2 best receivers were Thielen and Jonathan Mingo. Not great. Adding Deontay Johnson should help that out a little bit. Give him a little more to work with so you can see what he actually has in him. But just not much to write home about with this free agency so far for the Panthers.
No, the Bears are way more interesting, which is why I'm watching you scroll down to them right now.
Yes. The Bears are interesting. And I know that there's one person who's sitting at home and is like, why are they now building a good football team? Why couldn't they do this around me? Justin Fields has got to be feeling some type of way. He's got to be like, what the hell? Why couldn't they build a solid team around me? Now Caleb Williams is going to come into...
hold on a second. I'm not trying to cut you off too much, but I got to challenge you on that. You're telling me Justin Fields didn't have DJ Moore at receiver and didn't have Cole Kmet, a decent, a halfway decent tight end.
Cole Kmet's only. What was that?
I'm just saying that it's not like the Bears' cupboard was completely bare to use that phrase.
It was kind of bare.
That defense improved over the course of last year as well.
It was besides for DJ Moore, they had no receiver and only 1 year of DJ Moore, where Justin Fields went 4-3 down the stretch after coming back from injury. Cole Kmet's solid tight end. I'm actually a fan of Cole Kmet. Someone brought up a stat though to me. He's only had 2,000 yards in 4 seasons, which doesn't really, not eye-popping, not great, just okay.
Part of that's the QB play.
Part of that is the QB play. It's just, they just haven't had great weapons. Besides, Darnell Mooney was the number 2 receiver there. He's okay, but as a number 2 receiver, nothing special. That's not moving the needle for my football team. Now with the moves that they made this offseason, I wish Justin Fields got this like talent to work with. DeAndre Swift, Keenan Allen, DJ Moore.
Yeah. Keenan Allen's interesting
Like
because that guy's been rock solid for years.
it just get Justin Fields just never had this to work with. I've been saying they should keep him. I think they should keep him going 4-3 down the stretch with what they had on offense last year. To me, with Khalil Herbert as his number one running back and Darnell Mooney as his like wide receiver 2. And he went 4-3 down the stretch after returning from injury last year. I've been saying they should keep him and build around him. Like you trade that number 1 pick. They obviously did not keep him. But they could have traded the number 1 pick to the Patriots. The Patriots could have jumped up and taken Caleb Williams or something. They could have taken Marvin Harrison if they wanted. And then you have Justin Fields, DeAndre Swift, Marvin Harrison, Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, Cole Kmet. That offense would be insane. And then at 9, you take Fashanu or you take an edge rusher and you build a good team. But instead they're going with Caleb
Williams. I understand that POV. I get it. What that would entail, though, is you by trading that pick, the number 1 pick, if you were the Bears, even with all the riches you get in exchange for that number 1 pick, you'd still be riding everybody's jobs and then riding on Justin Fields as you have to figure out then, okay, we then have to pay him because he's coming up at the end of that first contract. Like I don't know that the Bears really saw Fields play in the pocket the way they want him to in order to convince them to not reset the organizational clock with another QB who the Bears probably feel like they can't miss out on because of the even distant Mahomes comparisons. They just cannot. This is the same Bears that were looking at QBs in the Patrick Mahomes draft, and I know that the Bears get brought up in relation to that all the time. And at some point, if it gets a dead horse beaten enough, is it even fair at that point to be that consumed in that history? But those memories do not fade quickly, and for the way Caleb Williams has been evaluated by most people, not saying anything's a sure thing. Even Trevor Lawrence, his developmental clock was disturbed by Urban Meyer and things like that in Jacksonville for T-Law. But the Bears know they aren't very good at this quarterback thing. They have a sample size Justin Fields that they don't think the field sample size did not tip the scales enough for them to pass on Caleb Williams, obviously. And as much as they could have put everything around, just like the people who are in charge at Chicago, where their jobs are working for the Bears right now, those jobs would all be lost if they put all of that around Justin Fields and then it still doesn't pan out. Everybody's fired, and whoever the next coach is gets the benefit of that beautiful roster offensively, minus the quarterback who would then be replaced by somebody else. So I understand why the Bears are doing what they're doing. But it's just
Justin Fields just has to feel some type of way. It's just like I get hurt, I come back and I go 4-3 with with a mid team around me, a very mid team around me, and then you start to gear up. Could have kept me and then got a lot more picks too. My thing too with the Caleb Williams, Justin Fields thing. My take on like trading the first round pick, like if people are that high on Caleb Williams, you could get so much for that first round pick. You could have just build a super team. If it fails, like you said, though, jobs are at stake then. But jobs are at stake with the Caleb Williams thing. If Caleb Williams fails, you're like, okay.
Right, I agree.
You're almost tied to him.
We're not deciding on Caleb Williams within 1 year the way we are on Justin Fields, and that's the difference.
Yeah, he's getting 5 years. He's getting 5 years. Justin Fields.
I don't know if anybody's getting 5 years anymore, but at least multiple years of 3 to 5,
multiple years to figure it out. Which
the way things are going, I don't know if anybody's getting 5 years to work out actually, because how many coaches how many head coaches even stay in one place for 5 years?
Yeah, not many anymore. The new front office for the Bears, though, is going to be tied to Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams doesn't work out, everyone's gone there, basically. Because that's how just things are in today's NFL. You're almost tied to your number 1 pick.
Like, but it's not like Caleb Williams is a controversial number 1 pick either. It's not like Williams is a controversial number 1 pick. So,
yeah. I,
I don't think these guys who work for the Bears are going to be that ashamed of it if they're not going to sit there saying, "Oh wow, we were the only ones who were so." It wasn't like it was a brazen like Daniel Jones type selection
well,
in
it's
that
just
spot in
like
the first round.
when people draft like a quarterback this high, you're tied to them no matter what. You're tied at the hip with them no matter what. When the Eagles drafted Carson Wentz, Doug Peterson was tied at the hip with Carson Wentz. When Carson Wentz failed, Doug Peterson failed. Like he was gone. It's that way with most quarterbacks when they're drafted. Urban Urban Meyer was tied at the hip with Trevor Lawrence to a degree, but that's a whole different story. Most young quarterbacks, though, when you draft a young quarterback, you're tied at the hip with that young QB when you're a new coach. And Matt Eberflus is still a new coach. And Poles there in Chicago is still a new GM. So they're tied at the hip with him. If it doesn't work out, they're probably going to be moving on very quickly.
From Eberflus, yeah.
Eberflus could be gone this year if they don't have a good year, potentially, because they're going to be like, okay, Caleb Williams. Why didn't it work out this year with Caleb Williams? What did he not do well? We need a new voice for him. And heads will roll quick for Eberflus if it does not work out quickly for them. I do love that Keenan Allen move, though. That offense is going to has the ability to be good if Caleb Williams is as good as people say. That Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, Swift. It's like an almost knockoff Eagles. Is that a good comparison? A knockoff Eagles. Caleb Williams knockoff Jalen Hurts right now because he's just coming into the league.
Caleb Williams, the expectations for him are that he's going to be significantly better than Jalen Hurts in certain areas of the game. Now, Hurts has already achieved such highs on that Super Bowl appearance. I mean, Hurts has achieved highs that we didn't expect when he was in his draft, but Williams, the Bears should expect more of Caleb Williams than what the Eagles have gotten even from Hurts so far.
I'll actually wind up getting into it at a later episode. When I have watched Caleb Williams, the reason I also was advocating for Fields, I'm not a huge fan of Caleb. Like, in college, he did not win a lot. Which to me is a red flag. It's almost the Herbert syndrome there. Herbert puts up a lot of numbers, like Caleb puts up a lot of numbers, but then doesn't win as well. Like,
Herbert's going to have a real head coach now in the NFL, so I'm going to reserve judgment on some of him until this season. But
he has had talent around him. He had like Keenan Allen, Mike Williams. It's just doesn't win for some reason. When if
you put Herbert on those college, Rams,
you should be
able to put Herbert on those Rams. It would be different. Being on the second place LA team is not that much fun. I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm making too many excuses for Herbie.
I just don't like the excuses like those people get. Like you have a lot of talent around you and get so many excuses year after year. And you have like to Herbert, he has a career record under 500. Caleb Williams just has a Herbertness to him almost. Like he's gonna put up the stats, I think. But I don't know if he's gonna be a winner.
Well, the Bears haven't had a QB who's put up real stats in quite some time. I mean, Fields stats are helped by the rushing too, but I don't know, man.
They haven't had a winner at all either, though.
So
they'd
one
be
of
happy
the two.
with just a stat.
You at least know that with Williams are getting the statistics, so we'll take that and go from there.
They'd be very happy with that.
Yeah.
I'll wind up getting the Caleb Williams in a later episode. Like when I was watching him,
I think you have some prospect fatigue.
Short on the shorter side, which I didn't like from him either. I don't like the shorter side of a QB, especially like 6'1". It's harder to see over the O-line. He held the ball a little long in place. He has all the arm talent in the world. Like, there's no debating that. He has all the talent in the world. Does he have it up here? That's the question mark with Caleb Williams. Is he okay? Is he not too cocky? That's like the problem a lot of people have with him there in Chicago. That he might be too cocky when he comes into the league. That a lot of people don't even like him already.
I think part of that's just because we've known he's going number one for so long. Everybody's already tired. Like I said, there's prospect fatigue. Everybody's so sick of him being discussed. But remove all that, and I think
He
you're looking at a guy who is just no question is the first pick.
Yeah, I think he's obviously the first pick. Like, he's clearly the best QB in this draft, clearly one of the best players in this draft. It's him and Marvin Harrison for the best player in the draft. But it's just he's not a very popular player in terms of like fanfare. Like, a lot of people like don't like the demands he was making in the offseason that people said while the season was going on. He was like he wants like 10% ownership or whatever if he goes to the Bears, which obviously will never happen in a cold day in hell. That'll never happen. But
That's a lot of
he's
noise
just
until
not a
we
very
get to
popular player among
right, until we get to the
fanfare.
real draft though, real draft day. That's a lot of noise. I'll wake up when he's having his introductory press
I
conference with the Bears, and we get to hear him clear air on all
I
the pre-draft
I
reporting.
do love that team though that they started to build. That Kevin Byard though deal, that's just an idiotic signing. Like, he was so bad this past year. 2 years, you're paying him $15 million for a bad cornerback or bad safety. He was not good this year in Philadelphia. The Titans traded him for 5th round pick for a reason. He had a big drop off. I guess they're paying him for what he did previously, which could work. But 15 million for Byard just seems like an overpay to me. He was not that great at all last year. Moving on, this team's actually interesting. This is the topic I think is the big topic on them. What are your thoughts so far on the vaunted Bengals, the hated Bengals in Baltimore? A lot of Baltimore fans do not like the Bengals. What are your thoughts on their offseason so far?
You have T. Higgins highlighted, and that's a storyline that with that franchise tag and then ensuing trade requests that Higgins has in, and because obviously they didn't make the progress on a long-term agreement, which in turn led to the tag, Higgins would like that stability and that security long term and everything that goes with that, and then the money, obviously. But the Bengals having Jamar Chase already in place, that he's the wide receiver one, really, and Higgins is a wide receiver one type talent, but there isn't necessarily going to be room for both of them. Well, Higgins has so
Yeah.
many different landing spots that probably fit that the Bengals should be able to, if they were to go through with a trade, they should be able to find a good return. But it's a matter of that team that's interested in making the money work. The Geno Stone signing on the defensive side at safety was a big steal within the division, so that's something that I'm keeping my eye on. Zach Moss at running back is a good add to compensate for no longer having Joe Mixon around. So that's a plus. Mike Gesicki is a well-known tight end. So these are names who I think are going to pan out pretty well. It's not necessarily a hot take to say that when Joe Burrow is already entrenched, obviously, as a star and makes guys like Gesicki and Moss that much better. And beyond that, I think they made a bunch of prudent decisions. Von Bell at safety is also an interesting addition to the secondary, but I think that obviously, yeah, Higgins takes the cake for the top headline, first in that
Yeah.
bulleted list there at PFF, and the Bengals have a little bit of a luxury because they could lose Tyler Boyd or I believe they actually are. Tyler Boyd is already on the market, right?
Yeah, he's a
If my
free
understanding is
agent.
correct. Yeah,
I
so
don't
I
know if he signed
apologize.
anywhere yet.
And T. Higgins may also wind up going elsewhere, but in the meantime, they do control Higgins, and if it can be if Higgins winds up either being willing to play on the tag or finds no other good option but to play on the tag, then that's what he might just have to do, and that would just be a matter of managing his level of content with the organization at that point. But at some point, I don't think the Bengals are going to be making or breaking based on whether they have T. Higgins around, but the highlights are really undeniable, and you'd like to be able to keep him in place, but it's an obvious backseat to Jamar Chase. So
The-
what happens with Higgins will affect Chase because Higgins will set the bar for whatever the market resets at with Jamar Chase's deal later on. But this is I don't think the Bengals are going to be too wrapped up. I mean, obviously it's something you're going to be wrapped up in, but I don't view it as
Yeah.
make or break for them because their make or break is Joe Burrow going a full season healthy.
I think the thing that's going to hurt him in terms of keeping T. Higgins too is the Calvin Ridley and Michael Pittman contracts. Those two contracts completely reset the market for receivers. Like if Calvin Ridley and Michael Pittman are getting 23 million a year, they're good receivers. T. Higgins is going to ask for 25 million a year. That's as much as AJ Brown's making. Like, is T. Higgins on the level of AJ Brown? No,
Well,
but
AJ Brown is
yeah.
a headache
AJ Brown's
sometimes.
a top 5
Uh,
receiver though.
Top 5?
Easily yes, easily top 5. Easily.
All right.
Very easily. You got
Okay. I
Jefferson,
mean,
you got Devontae Adams, AJ Brown, Tyreek Hill,
hold
Jamar
on a second.
Chase.
You got Jamar Chase, Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs,
Yeah. Stephon Diggs hasn't been great this past year. Wasn't great the last 2 years.
and nobody on the Eagles ended well this past season. So I don't know.
AJ Brown this year had a streak of 8 games. First ever time in NFL history, may have been 7, of 125 yards or more. It was
Yeah,
the
that's
first ever time in NFL history that had been done. AJ Brown is on a different level than T. Higgins. T.
we'll
Higgins
see. We'll
is
see. This is
like
part of the thing. We'll see if Higgins goes somewhere that doesn't have Jamar Chase as the top line receiver. Then maybe we'll see whether Higgins can match that kind of production with one football to go
back
around.
back to the contract part though. 25 million is like that's what he's going to command. Like it just reset the entire market. Those contracts the other people signed. So they're either going to have to pay him 25 million or trade him, and it looks like they're set on trading him. Now landing spots for him, I think the Houston Texans would be a great landing spot. It's a matter though of do the Bengals want to trade
Right.
for do the Bengals want to trade him to Houston? That's what it's a matter of for the Bengals.
Yeah,
Which
if I were the Bengals,
I
I'd be
don't know if
using
you
that
want to do that.
AFC label to drive the price up and be like, well, if we're gonna give him away within the conference, we better have a really that much richer return.
And a team like the Texans who are joining the mix of a team that the Bengals would have to compete with. It's do you want to trade him
Right.
and trade him to competition that you're going to have this season? Because that would make the Bengals the Texans that much better. You'd have Tank Dell, T. Higgins, Joe Mixon. They'd be Bengals South. They'd be the Bengals South. They have a Ohio State quarterback, former Ohio State quarterback.
Yeah.
Like the Bengals have a former Ohio State quarterback. They'd
Oh, okay.
literally
Well,
be
yeah,
the Bengals
technically.
South. I like the Bengals offseason though with the other signings. Sheldon Rankins for 2 years, Von Bell for a year. Solid signing. Zach Moss, solid running back. Gesicki, solid tight end. Solid signings for the Bengals this offseason. I'm interested to see though with T. Higgins what's going to happen there. Moving on with the Browns, nothing much here except for the Jameis Winston signing. He could get a chance to start this year.
Yeah.
With how Watson played last year, Jameis could get a chance to start this year if Watson plays bad at all next year to start the year. Zadarius Smith for 2 years, I think that's a good signing for the Browns. And then acquiring Jerry Jeudy, I think that's a really good trade for the Browns. You're going to have Amari Cooper, Jerry Jeudy. Jerry Jeudy as a number 2 receiver, he has less of a role, but he can be mentored by a great route runner in Amari Cooper. Maybe it can help Jerry Jeudy learn and grow into a solid receiver. Having that experienced veteran around that he can follow.
Yeah, Judy's a good pickup. Judy's definitely a good pickup. You want wide receiver depth. When Amari Cooper got hurt was banged up during the Flacco run last season for the Browns, David Njoku had that much greater a role, but
Yeah.
you definitely like seeing a bigger name receiver too in Judy, who you can add, who's not going to have to be the guy by any means, but gives Watson another option or gives Winston another option if Watson is held up by on or off the field setbacks. So it is interesting that the Browns didn't roll with bringing back Flacco in the backup capacity. Flacco, I know, had some level of interest and thought of seeing if there could be a bridge starter type spot available outside of the Browns. But beyond that, the belief is there was at least a little bit of mutual interest in running back the Joe Flacco Browns backup lifestyle, and it didn't turn out to be. I'm just kind of surprised they chose Winston for that backup spot because Jameis throws it to his reputation has been for throwing it to the other team a good number of times. I don't know how I feel about that. Even when you remove the Joe Flacco bias that's inherent in my discussion of him, we'll see. But I don't even know how much Winston's going to wind up playing. I just think that the ending with Joe's Flacco's play in the wild card game was ugly with the back-to-back pick sixes. I understand that, but Jameis Winston sort of reminds me of that, where the wheels can fall off with the number of interceptions. So
I think with the Jameis move, they're almost trying to replicate how the Joe Flacco thing went.
perhaps
Like the second half of the year, like similar types of like second half of the years, like what you would expect. Joe Flacco we're throwing like an average of 2 picks a game. I can very well picture Jameis Winston throwing 2 picks a game but throwing 3 touchdowns a game with Amari Cooper and Jerry Jeudy and Njoku as his weapons. Like, I just pulled up the stats for Joe Flacco. I'm trying to pull up the game logs this year. Give me 1 second, pulling up the game log. Like, I can picture Jameis Winston having this game log. Like, and I think these game logs, and I think the Browns can picture it too, which is probably why they brought him in, just because it's a younger version, basically. So, 1 pick, 3 picks, 2 picks, 1 pick, 2 picks. Literally had a pick at like every game at least. And then 2 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns, 2 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns, 1 touchdown. So he was throwing more touchdowns than interceptions, had 13 touchdowns, 8 interceptions in 6 games. I can very well picture Jameis stat line like that. Jameis had the 30 for 30 year in Tampa. They got a younger version of what Flacco was last year, basically. I think it's a solid signing for them. I'd like to see
getting younger at backup makes sense. Getting younger at backup does make sense. Flacco just generated so much goodwill for them in their fan base,
you
and
had
I just
cool Joe.
But hey, the other side of that
Joe
is
Cool.
the Patriots era with the dynasty was not being sentimental about players, moving on from them right before you quote needed to, but you got out in front of their decline, all that kind of thing. So I'm not going to bash on the Browns either. It's not their most important move. The most important move is not even a move. It's just, can Deshaun Watson actually be a grown-up at QB?
Yeah, and can he be healthy? Because last year getting hurt, he started to do solid before he got hurt last year. They started to get on a win streak, and then he got hurt. And Joe Flacco came in, and Joe Flacco went off.
And he had a good defense behind him as well. The Browns
he went on a great stretch. Stefanski was coach of the year. They had Browns have a solid team. Bringing in Jeudy, I think, makes it a lot even better. Gives them even better of a chance to be in the mix. If Watson can get back to form of what he's supposed to be, what he was in Houston. Also, sorry for people, I'm tripping up over my words a lot today because it was a little hungover.
Oh gosh, night. You're gonna say it on the record.
Had some fun last night. I'll say it on the record. Gotta be real.
You gotta be real.
But Jerry Jeudy was a great trade for the Browns. Should help elevate Deshaun Watson, help elevate that offense. Gives them more weapons to play with, more toys to play with there in Cleveland. Don't even need to say anything about this team.
The Dallas Cowboys.
They've literally done nothing except for this. And re-signing people. Now they got to re-sign a lot of people. They got to re-sign for next year. Their contracts are up. Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, Zach Martin's contract is up. DeMarcus Lawrence's contract. Brandon Cooks are going to let go. Half of those people they might let go. Zach Martin might be a cap casualty next year. Then they got to pay Micah soon. They got to make some big moves there in Dallas. I don't mind them losing Tony Pollard. Because Tony Pollard's the type of back you need another back with him. He's a good change of pace back. Like, he's not a needle mover. So they might wind up drafting a running back to replace Tony Pollard in a draft, but not much to say about this team. Been a quiet all season for Dallas.
Yeah, I'm most curious about where the draft goes at running back. Yeah.
Yeah. After Jerry Jones said we want to go all in. And then Skip Bayless has a new famous tweet. All in, comma. I'm not even gonna say the word because I don't want the video to get flagged or whatever. Expletive. ASS. But if you read the tweet, it's a bad tweet by Skip Bayless. Had 76 million views in like 2 days. Did you see that tweet?
Because it's grammatically appropriate for what he was getting across. So
That's
it
76
matters.
million
Punctuation
views
matters.
is insane.
Punctuation
The punctuation does matter there. On to the Broncos. This is the move to talk about, but there's nothing really to talk about with them, I would say. I think everyone expected the Russell Wilson to be cut and Justin Simmons to be cut. Justin Simmons is on the older side. Russell Wilson just was bad there. Do you have any big takeaways from the Broncos?
They had to just rip that off, that bandage off later than this offseason, and that's what happened. And it has to live with the egg on the face for a little bit, but people forget sooner if the Broncos make a right call on a quarterback in the draft, considering that I'm not exactly sure
if
the
it's
Broncos
probably going to be like Penix. I know. Do they even have a pick?
Penix type guy. Michael Penix could be in a picture. Penix, hopefully, if he's healthy, and I could even see, like, maybe I know the Jets are trying to move on from Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson, if he winds up with the Broncos, which has been a graveyard for QBs, that could be Zach Wilson's last stop of his career in the NFL, honestly. But it seems like there are fewer and fewer options to where it could be Zach Wilson backing up a draft pick on the Broncos QB depth chart. I mean, that's just by draft pick, I mean a 2024 pick. So I have a headache just
Did they even have a first round pick? Or did they trade it to Seattle? Does Seattle have their pick? I'm looking at a mock draft. I think Seattle might have their pick. Oh, no, they got a pick. They got pick 12.
Nix could be in play for the Broncos, perhaps.
They got pick 12, so it's Bo Nix or Michael Penix. At pick 12, most likely Michael Penix.
You're assuming JJ McCarthy is going to be gone.
Yeah,
then.
JJ right now is being projected like top 6. Giants or Vikings.
That's a trade up.
Might go after him. Like in this mock draft I'm looking at, the Giants might get him at pick 6, is what they're projecting. The top 3 the top 5 in the draft is almost locked in, basically. The order. I'll get into that in a few minutes when we get to another team in this free agency list. But the Broncos had to move on. They had to rip the Band-Aid off, like you said. Failed Russell Wilson experiment. Now Russell Wilson can go help the Steelers forge. As he would say, let's forge in Pittsburgh. Steelers country, let's forge. We're going to move on to the Lions. Nothing that pops out here. Re-signing Graham Glasgow is a solid move. Nothing really pops out here for the Lions. Is there any big takeaways for you on the Lions?
Working on the corner position was a big deal. So getting by way of trade Carlton Davis is something that
trade flew under the radar. Yeah, I didn't even see
so
that.
That's something to look at. And re-signing at corner Emmanuel Mosley. So those would be a couple. Zonovan Knight at running back is a name I've heard before, but even just like Michael Badgley at kicker. Just because, hey, mentioned the kicker. The Lions are going to be in close games. They're going to be very competitive, and having a kicker who's been in the league a little while is not a bad thing. So, yeah, all in all, the Lions want to get right back to the precipice or the cusp of the Super Bowl as they once stood this past winter. So,
have a harder path.
There are some moves that get them in that spot.
They're going to have a harder path now, though, because the team that we're about to go to, the Green Bay Packers have made some big moves. The Green Bay Packers are trying to be the NFC representative to go to the Super Bowl this year, which they might have a legit chance. You got Xavier McKinney beat out the Eagles trying to get Xavier McKinney. You released Aaron Jones, which was shocking, but then you brought in
Yeah.
Josh Jacobs.
So then it made more sense.
Josh Jacobs, Xavier McKinney, two big signings there. Re-signed AJ Dillon. They're releasing Devondre Campbell, but they had to, I think, for cap purposes. Xavier McKinney, Josh Jacobs are some big signings for the Packers, trying to get to the NFC Championship and further this year.
That's correct. That you said it as well as I could. The Packers are looking really strong. I thought Aaron Jones clicked so well with them, but Josh Jacobs being plugged in is a pretty big deal and makes you much less wary of that position.
Yeah.
And it, more than any of these items listed in the free agency picture for the Packers, it falls on how you can lean on Jordan Love to continue to evolve. And he already grew up a lot in these playoffs that we just watched. So it's a spot where the Packers did not spend long in a murky spot. You know, it's the opposite of the Jets, right? The Jets have to deal with Aaron Rodgers now and all that chaos and controversy, and the Packers can simply enjoy the fact that they hit on another quarterback in the draft, a quarterback with whom they were patient, and a quarterback whom they are now supporting with a roster that's probably even a tick better than it was on its underdog run in the playoffs. So have my hats off.
A roster that they're hoping and might have a legit chance this year, because they're going to be one of the top 3 teams in the NFC, maybe on paper, before the year starts, at least as of now, to bring the Lombardi trophy back home. It's very obvious that's what their goal is this year. Like, there's no debate about that. It's very obvious. Their goal is bring that Lombardi trophy back home. And they're building a team that might be able to compete for it and bring that trophy back to Green Bay. Moving on to the Texans. Texans have had a good offseason, really good offseason, signing a lot of people, a lot of shorter deals, but they're trying to go all in and compete this year. That's why I said to T. Higgins earlier, T. Higgins to Houston would be a huge move for them. That would be like okay, they're for real. They're not messing around. But Joe Mixon, they acquired Danielle Hunter for 2 years, $50 million. Azeez Al-Shahir, one of the best linebackers on the in free agency. He was the number 2 linebacker in free agency this year. Noah Brown, re-signing Noah Brown, signing Jeff Okudah, who has been a bust so far, but bringing him in. A lot of moves, re-signing Dalton Schultz. A lot of moves to try to get to where they can truly compete and be one of the upper echelon teams in the AFC.
Yeah, the Texans are on the ascent, and you picked out the names that I would have also discussed. I would only add that the Danielle Hunter thing is big because the offense is really well coached and has a very promising young quarterback, and so defensively, having complement there is huge with the pass rush on the other side. With Hunter having him on the course of 2 years is quite helpful because I know that there were other teams that were in on Hunter, and of course he would be in demand. And so for the Texans to be beating teams out for free agents like that, it's a positive reflection on obviously the momentum and energy behind the whole Stroud era that's gotten started.
It helps their D-line even more. Their D-line was solid last year. Derek Barnett actually came in and made a difference for them after not doing anything in Philly. You bring in Danielle Hunter. They got a solid team there in Houston. They're going to be trying to compete with the Chiefs and be one of the teams that try to knock the Chiefs off this year. Moving on to the Colts. The Colts signed your boy, Joe Flacco, but for the most part, they just made a lot of just re-signing their own guys, bringing their own guys back. Nothing major yet. Just
re-signing Michael Pittman was a big deal. You mentioned it.
Yeah. Yes, re-signing Pittman, that actually the $23 million aspect is going to completely reset the market. The Calvin Ridley deal that we're going to get into very shortly, actually, that just completely messed everything up contract-wise. Because they weren't willing to pay Adrian Brown that contract, but they would pay Calvin Ridley that deal. But
Let me also just touch on it with the Colts linebacker Zaire Franklin, that extension of 3 years,
yeah,
a
that's
centerpiece of that defense. And Flacco being added as a backup quarterback to Anthony Richardson is a good move.
who
Flacco's
got
resurrected his
hurt.
career. There, he is probably just has a way better image now in the league, having put behind him being in tough spots in Denver and the New York Jets, and having a quick blip in Philadelphia. But of course, that blip in Philadelphia, very short time with the Eagles, allowed that overlap with Shane Steichen, right? So Steichen and Flacco being together with Anthony Richardson. Flacco was in a spot where he was being supplanted by Lamar Jackson, and still you see the old clips of Joe talking to Lamar with RG3 on the sideline of a Ravens game on TikTok or what have you, and it's like you can picture Flacco being in a better position to really embrace being a part of how the Colts bring along Anthony Richardson, and also
Yeah,
Flacco has to like it from his perspective because Anthony Richardson is coming off of pretty serious combination of injuries, so
he
in the
got
way
hurt in
Richardson
like
plays,
every game he started, I think.
yeah, the Colts need the security of Flacco to be
Yeah,
reliably behind AR.
yeah, they needed a backup big time. Richardson got hurt in every single game he started, I believe, this year, which is just unheard of. It's a red flag. Richardson's good. I like Richardson, but
Yeah,
they
he's
needed a
tantalizing to
backup,
me
and
in
Flacco's
fantasy
a good
football.
backup there.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Moving on to the Jaguars. Jaguars actually had some solid moves, bringing in Eric Armstead. You bring in Ronald Darby, who's been solid for Baltimore. Nothing special. They bring in Devin Duvernay. He's going to be a return specialist for Jacksonville. Solid signing there. Darnell Savage, Caravel alumni.
Yep.
Good signing there. Gabe Davis, solid signing. I'm not a huge fan of Gabe Davis. He has games where he pops off, but then he has a lot of games where he just goes completely quiet.
That's fine if he's not
They've
number one.
made Yeah, it's just for Jacksonville, it's a solid move. If they can get another receiver and make him a wide receiver 3, then it's a really good signing. I don't like him as a wide receiver 2, especially when Christian Kirk's your wide receiver 1. Christian Kirk's solid receiver, but you need to upgrade the receiver room there in Jacksonville. But they've made some solid moves so far, trying to get a little younger. Their moves indicate.
Yeah, Eric Armstead, the
Yeah.
signing there for Jaguars is interesting. He gets the money he was looking for, and a talented player the Jaguars willing to spend on just over $50 million. And beyond that, I think that the Mac Jones trade is so interesting now that Mac Jones, a young
Oh
quarterback,
yeah, the Mac Jones
find
trade. I
another
just
another
skipped
young
right over
another
that.
young quarterback in Trevor Lawrence. Mac Jones feels like he's in a similar boat as what
I
Desmond Ritter
forgot about
has
that
really
too.
with Arizona, right? Like one younger guy behind another younger guy, and
The
then it feels like this is really a middle stop before wherever Jones winds up next. Even if Jones happens to play a little bit and shows hopes and flashes of turning things around in a spot that's actually a well-coached offensive organization, unlike New England, then Jones could be flipped elsewhere. So kind of interested in that if
I
the Jaguars can channel him into a resource to trade someplace else, or if he just turns out to be somebody who sees the field and stabilizes them if T. Law is having another injury season.
For the Mac Jones trade, I actually where's that echo coming from? There was an echo. Sorry if anyone heard that. It's not there now, but the Mac Jones trade was interesting to me because they gave up, I think, like a 4th-round pick for Mac Jones. Like it was significant. To me, that's an indication. Like after Trevor Lawrence's year last year, that they're trying to put pressure on Trevor,
I don't know about
saying
that.
you got to.
Uh,
Trevor Lawrence had a below average year last year. I think they're trying to put pressure on him. Like you got to step up this year, or we got someone we might try to give a shot to. If you don't, because Trevor Lawrence had a. I'm not putting him in bust category yet, but people are starting to put him in bust category for being a number 1 overall pick. He hasn't lived up to the hype yet, except for only 1 year. What did they trade? I'm trying to figure out though what exactly the move was for Mac Jones. Exchange for a 2024 draft choice. For it does not say. Why can't I find this? A 6th
Well,
round
when it
pick.
was
Okay, a 6th round pick is nothing significant. It just seems like
it's
that's
the
an
same
odd
price
move.
as
You're
Justin
trading for
Fields,
another young QB. Yeah,
you
same
know?
price as Justin Fields. Which that Justin Fields move we'll get into quickly was a great move for the Steelers, I think. Very cheap for the Steelers, and they needed a young QB there after trading Pickett. But I find that Mac Jones trade interesting. It's like I think they're trying to put pressure on Trevor after the year he had last year. Had a very underwhelming year. After they had AFC Championship hopes coming into this year with Calvin Ridley, they had a very underwhelming year.
The way that Mac Jones, though, finished with New England, I don't think he's going anywhere. He's not walking
Yeah.
in any QB room giving a guy like
Yeah.
Lawrence his pedigree any kind of real pressure. I don't know if that's the word, but yeah, I see where the Jaguars would be interested in having. Again, it's not like Mac
Like,
Jones is going to be out of the league. Somebody had to get him, and I
yeah.
can see how the Jaguars would be a spot where they could use a backup with a ceiling that's yet to be determined.
I'm going to try to start to fly through some of these because they're going a little overtime or a decent bit overtime. The Chiefs, Hollywood Brown, I think, is a great signing for them. I'm pretty sure you would agree with that. A lot of people are
Yeah,
intrigued
yeah,
with
the Chiefs can turn
Hollywood Brown
Hollywood
there.
Hollywood into a guy who's gonna
I
pop
was about
off
to
the
say
screen
Jones
again.
because Chris Jones, but my bad for interrupting. But yeah, Hollywood Brown there. That's a really intriguing signing for the Chiefs. Jumps into that speed role, gives them another weapon. Him, Hollywood Brown, Rasheed Rice, Travis Kelce. Offense is going to be still elite. The Chiefs are going to be the Chiefs. That's a very intriguing move. Moving on to the Raiders, nothing big here. Releasing Jimmy G. Signing Christian Wilkins is actually very big. I don't know why I said nothing big here. Christian Wilkins is a solid move there. Helps out their D line. You have Christian Wilkins, Max Crosby now on that D line. Solid move there for the Raiders. I don't know if there's anything else that really sticks out to you there.
Not as much when you look at the Raiders' moves. You hit on the biggest ones. Wilkins was one of the biggest monetary splashes out there. Hunter Renfrow being released at
Gardner.
receiver was like, shoot, some of these mainstays, Renfrow, Kibbe Brian Hoyer also released. Looking at our screen here, it's like, sheesh. For me, it's almost more the exits than the entrances. Although Gardner Minshew should be mentioned because Minshew is one of those QBs, the veteran
Minshew
QBs who
Mania.
move places, who might matter the most in the near term,
Yeah.
playing immediately, depending on who the Raiders might add in the draft. Might not be a guy who plays right away. Minshew could be one of the more true bridges, and Minshew did turn in valuable time for Indianapolis, right, last season.
Yeah,
So
he was really good for Indy last year. Minshew Mania going to Vegas. That actually will be very interesting if he's starting in the beginning of the year. Minshew Mania in Vegas. There's going to be some catchphrases made up for that. I guarantee that. You got Uncle Rico going to play in Vegas. Moving on to the Chargers. They traded Keenan Allen. There's not much to say with the Chargers. Except the Keenan Allen, Gus Edwards moves. I think the Keenan Allen trade, though, indicates very clearly who they're drafting at number 5 if the draft plays out how expected. QBs in the top 3 picks. Then the Cardinals will go Marvin Harrison. Leaves the guy who's starting to get a lot of hype and being put on the same playing field as Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors.
Yeah.
Trading Keenan Allen and releasing Mike Williams opens the door where Malik Neighbors seems like the locked-in pick for the Chargers.
Yeah, Chargers had to get their financials in order. They did, and getting such a great receiver in the draft would be an affordable follow-up.
If there's betting odds for that yet, I'm pretty sure that would be at like minus 250. Like it's either that or no lineman, but Malik Neighbors makes a lot of sense there. the Chargers. Like almost too much sense when the draft comes around. Moving on to the Rams. Nothing big here except for this. Salute to Aaron Donald and Cameron Curl. That actually went under the radar the day that Aaron Donald retired. They signed Cameron Curl,
Yeah.
who was a solid safety.
You can understand that news cycle would be a little bit more concentrated on Aaron Donald.
Yeah, Aaron Donald retiring just completely overshadowed the Cameron Curl thing. Jonah Jackson's actually a decent signing for them there. But Aaron Donald, hats off to Aaron Donald on a great career. Where would you put him as an all-time defensive tackle?
The group chat with our guys who are currently on the cage was saying, first ballot Hall of Fame for sure. But then you try to figure out, like, where does it rank? It's hard because you compare the eras and you think about too. Just the number of pass attempts in the game goes up over the years with the way the passing oriented offenses are now. So you get more chances at the QB. That's a long way of saying that. I mean, you still have to wind up probably fits somewhere in the top 5, right?
I put him top 3 for sure.
Yeah. Top 3 is even a step further. Yeah.
The resumes that match up. I was going from the NFL 100 team a few years ago. Aaron Donald would definitely be on that now. But the resumes that are comparable, there's 3 resumes comparable to him. Me and Joe only had 5 All-Pros, though. He had 4 Super Bowls, but he only had 5 All-Pros. He had 2 Defensive Player of the Years, which matches up. But Aaron Donald, similar resume. You could put Aaron Donald's resume ahead of his, probably. Alan Page, 6 All-Pros. I don't think he had a Defensive Player of the Year. Maybe had 1, but he had an MVP. But it's also a different time period. You put you put Alan Page in this time period, he's not winning an MVP. It's impossible for a defensive tackle to win an MVP in today's day and age. So it almost taints that MVP for Alan Page to a degree when you're just comparing resumes. Aaron Donald, by the way, had 3 Defensive Player of the Year awards, 8 All-Pros, 1 Super Bowl. Then the other comparison was Randy White from Delaware, former Cowboy. He had 9 All-Pros. 9 All-Pros is nothing to sneeze about. It's the most all-time at the position.
Yeah,
those are the 3 comparable resumes, and you can almost make a case for Aaron Donald over every single one of them.
Yeah, so that's how arguable it is. But even if he's behind those 3, you're at number 4 in your top 5.
Yeah,
so that's why I was.
Minimum, he's 4th on the list.
Yeah,
I wanted to say hats off though to Aaron Donald on a great career.
Yes, definitely.
Moving on to the Dolphins, they've had a lot of moves fly under the radar in the last few days because Aaron Donald dominated the news cycle after retiring, like we just mentioned. Signing Jordan Poyer to a 1-year deal, signing Shaq Barrett, Jordan Brooks, Jonnu Smith. They've just had a lot of under the radar moves, but solid looking moves for the Dolphins.
Yeah, picked up Kendall Fuller at corner.
Neville Gallimore. These moves flew under the radar.
Well, did they fly under the radar, or is it the Dolphins, and we're just waiting on the Dolphins to win a playoff game in a cold weather environment?
Xavier Howard released.
Yeah, and then you have Fuller at corner.
Yeah, these moves just flew. I just feel like they flew right under the radar. Like,
we'll see.
I didn't even
see
hear
what,
about half.
I mean, because reality is the Dolphins. The headline of the Dolphins is still the offense, right? So,
yeah,
like Jonnu Smith at tight end with Gesicki no longer there. Those are the kind of additions that are interesting.
I'm a fan of their offseason so far. Nice additions here in Miami. Try to help out Tua. Try to get over this year.
You should be able to make all the pieces work. They have a pretty fun coach down there.
Moving on to the Vikings. Anything that pops out to you? Releasing Madison, signing Aaron Jones,
signing Sam Darnold as kind of their equivalent of the Gardner Minshew bridge situation, depending on how the draft goes for Minnesota. That stands out. Jerry Tillery on the defensive line is a recognizable name, but the biggest thing is Aaron Jones. for me on offense.
Yeah, a
Running back.
definite upgrade over Alexander Madison. Madison was a solid running back, but Aaron Jones is a better running back than Alexander Madison. I don't think that's really debatable.
Now it
I
is
don't
at
think
only 1
anyone would
year for
argue with that.
Jones. It is at only 1 year
Yeah.
for Jones. So
So they'll probably draft a running back to groom that they'll have under the cheap for the next few years. But so they've had a solid offseason. Blake Cashman, Jonathan Greenyard, 4 years, $76 million. I like their offseason. Solid offseason. You upgrade at running back. You need a quarterback there now. JJ McCarthy. That would be a solid quarterback there for Minnesota. Moving on to the Patriots. It's the Patriots. It's almost a snooze fest, except for Antonio Gibson.
yeah.
That's
They
like the
also
only
re-signed Hunter
notable thing
Henry
there.
offensively,
Yeah.
tight end.
Austin Hooper, you bring him back. You signed him. It's the Patriots, though. It's still seems like they got Bill Belichick as their head coach, not really signing anyone.
Well, they're going to need more time to get real offensive skill
Yeah.
fusion.
Yeah.
So
They need some time there in New England for who's there. Why am I drawing such a blank right now? I'm so out of it right now today.
what, Gerard Mayo?
Yeah, Gerard Mayo. Why was I drawing
Yeah.
such a blank on that?
Dude, I don't know, man. It's because the Patriots haven't really
But
been in the thick of the top of mind.
they're gonna need some time for Gerard Mayo to build it there. I'm gonna move on. Starting to try to fly through this. Saints releasing Michael Thomas is a big move, but nothing really else stands out except extending Tyrann Mathieu.
Yeah. Honey Badger's
The
the story there.
Giants, Green Goblin, they signed. Their big move is they brought in John Runyon, Devin Singletary, but their big move, Brian Burns, giving them what I think is the best defensive line in football, at least starting defensive line. You have Kayvon Thibodeau, Dexter Lawrence, and Brian Burns. That's insane.
That is pretty. That is pretty standout, and it's impressive that they were able to pull Drew Lock from the Seahawks, because I kind of thought Drew Lock had an interesting thing going there with being alongside and behind Geno Smith. Seemed like Geno and Drew Lock got along. So
Well, the Seahawks now got a QB, a young QB, who they might be able to try to build up. We'll get into that in a second. The Jets, nothing really that stands out, nothing major yet, except for Tyron Smith, who they just brought in, Morgan Moses from the Ravens. Solid moves for the Jets, building up that offensive line, trying to protect Rodgers so he doesn't have another Achilles injury.
Another former Raven from further back, Tyrod Taylor, with everything around Rodgers, his own recovery and all the off-the-field stuff. Have Tyrod Taylor, a grown-up at QB, Riley at backup, that's a good deal. And Javon Kinlaw defensively stood out for me.
Who knows? Tyrod might be the starting QB. Aaron Rodgers might have bigger fish to fry with being a vice presidential candidate.
That man, he's
that's
pretty sure bet to get into politics after his playing days, but it's just a matter of when. Like how soon are his post playing dates coming?
The fact that he might be trying to be a vice president, that's just insane.
Yeah, well, I think it's insane.
Jets
I mean, the concept of him being in the political sphere doesn't surprise me, but yeah, right now I think he's teetering on insane that he hasn't cleared the air on that yet. So
wouldn't that be very Jets-like if he just says, you know what, I'm not playing football this year. I'm going to try to be the vice president of the United States. He just
that's like an HBO
retires
show or
from
something.
football out of nowhere.
Yeah.
That would just be very Jets-like. Very Jets-luck. I'm going to try to fly through this since we're long on time and just talk on big topics. I like the CJ Gardner-Johnson move. I like the Saquon move a lot. Still a lot of work to be done here, though. I want to bring back Avante on a cheaper deal because you need some work to be done in that secondary, so push Bradbury further down on the depth chart. You still need some work at linebacker. You did bring in Devin White, but that's likely to be addressed in the draft. this guy's gonna be cut. Has the worst separation in the league over the last few years. Bryce Huff is the replacement for Hassan Reddick if we don't sign Hassan Reddick. Josh Sweat, they already said is going to be coming back. We restructured Josh Sweat's deal. Just traded for Kenny Pickett as a backup. Nothing major in the deal. It's just moving back 22 spots, I believe. I like Kenny Pickett as a backup QB.
The number of the Ritter, Mac Jones, Kenny Pickett. It's kind of interesting. The number of younger
Fields,
guys who are
Powell.
backups moving. It's like, what the heck?
Solid moves overall for the Eagles. I gotta mention this though. Did not. First time I've had a chance to mention it. Fletcher Cox. Hats off to Fletcher Cox on a great career. If it's not for Aaron Donald, Fletcher Cox might be a first ballot Hall of Famer. If it's not for Aaron Donald being in his way. But Aaron Donald completely overshadowed Fletcher Cox. He completely overshadowed him. And that's the reason Fletcher Cox is going to be a first ballot.
Donald is also a touch better, but it's still both extremely influential.
That's what I'm saying.
Their respective teams.
A lot better and just over. He's the reason Fletcher Cox doesn't have more All Pros. You take Aaron Donald out of the NFL, Fletcher Cox has 6 All Pros, maybe.
We could do that all day though with different guys. Like if you take this elite guy out of his position, then he could have we could do that a fair bit. But I understand exactly what you're getting.
It just hurts Fletcher Cox's resume to a degree. It would be cool to see him get in with Jason Kelce first ballot in 2029.
Yeah, I understand that angle.
Aaron Donald was in his way from getting more accolades, which is going to hurt him from being first ballot that year. But overall, solid moves for the Eagles. Like what they're doing. Still a lot of work to be done on the defensive side of things. The offense, I think you would agree with this, is going to be, depending on what Kellen Moore brings,
right,
very entertaining. Has the potential to be a high-powered offense.
Yeah, Barkley being aboard is major. Because that should, if he can be on the field in a healthy status, that's going to open life up for Jalen Hurts more. Now that Jalen Hurts is more of a known quantity. And how about Jake Elliott as a quick footnote, getting that much money? Pretty cool.
24. That's $6 million a year. Holy shit! That's insane. I mean, that's a
he's
kicker.
Played quite well, right? So
he does. He deserves it though. He's gonna go down as an all-time Eagle, like David Akers realm type stuff.
Yeah.
You got Landon Dickerson getting a lot of money, most ever for a guard. Solid moves though for the Eagles overall. Moving on to the Steelers. Biggest move that they brought in your guy, Patrick Queen. Biggest move they made was Justin Fields a day ago. Justin Fields there for a 6, which can turn into a 4, is a great move, I think.
And it won't turn into a 4 because he's not expected to play much.
Russell Wilson only got 125. So
right, because the Broncos are paying most of that, right?
They're gonna have a QB battle in training camp. Whoever wins it out. I like that spot for Fields though. It gives him a grown-up organization.
Oh yeah, I'm the Ravens guy, and I'll tell you, it's a better situation. I don't even think necessarily that Fields is going to be an actual viable contender to start over Wilson, but he doesn't have to be. He can just rehabilitate from having to be in Chicago.
It gives him a good situation, a good change of scenery that maybe could work out eventually for him. He could actually have an organization that knows what they're doing compared to a bottom organization who has never had a good QB, who fails quarterbacks over and over and over again. Chicago's where quarterbacks go to die. I
nominate the Broncos as well, ironically.
You're just,
maybe not ironic.
Broncos, Patriots now.
Jets. Well, not okay. Patriots had the GOAT. The GOAT became the GOAT when he was with New England. So let's hold on.
I said now, ever since Brady left.
Well, yeah. Ever since Brady is just one guy, Mac Jones. I mean, we're talking about the Jets.
Well, Bears, they had Cam Newton.
Broncos have had futility. Cam Newton was a retread. Let's be honest with ourselves.
But Justin Fields going to the Steelers, he at least gets to go to a grown-up organization now, which I'm excited to see what can happen there. Moving on to the Niners. Biggest talk for them has been the Ayuk and Deebo Samuel stuff. Like, are they going to trade one of them because they got to pay Ayuk? Interested to see what happens with that. The talk is they want to keep Ayuk, though, and move on potentially from Deebo if they do move on from anyone. Some teams inquired about Deebo. I think your Ravens inquired about Deebo. Some other teams did as well.
Yeah, allegedly.
But
yeah. Mm-hmm.
This was the other move, releasing Eric Armstead. And Eric Armstead only signed for what the Niners were offering originally. Like what he's the 3 years, $51 million. The Niners were basically offering that. And he declined it originally. He tried to hit the open market and didn't get what he wanted. So then he just signed in Jacksonville for 3 years, $51 million. Niners are still a very solid team. There's nothing to write home about, though, I think, here. Trying to get better at edge with Leonard Floyd and Yetur Gross-Matos.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Moving on to the Seahawks. Nothing or two big moves here. Re-signing Leonard Williams, re-signing Noah Fant, and then you got Sam Howell. What's your thoughts on that move?
Yeah, Sam Howell, another one of those young quarterbacks who moves as a backup from one place to another. And so that sort of influences, like, okay, Howell actually, I believe Howell's cost was it a touch above what some of these other guys went for in trade?
It was like what Pickett's deal was, basically. Pickett was like a fourth, fifth pick swap or whatever.
We'll leave it to be determined if the Howell move means the Seahawks are postponing long-term QB examinations in the draft to a later draft year. But
yeah,
they chose their guy. I mean, it's just it's so interesting to me how Howell was one of several options at young backup quarterback genre, and that's who they went with. Like, I just find it interesting. But the bigger thing on offense is bringing back tight end Noah Fant. They now can rub in even more the winning side of the Russell Wilson trade, because of course Fant was part of that deal. So
they easily won.
Yeah,
the Russell Wilson trade. I actually saw they're releasing Jamal Adams and Quandre Diggs. So trying to get younger at safety in the secondary, which they've been doing the last few years. When you brought in Devin Witherspoon to pair with like Terry Coolin.
Right.
They're trying to get younger on that side of the ball, trying to retool that side of the ball. I like that Sam Howell trade, though, for them. Interesting, let him compete with Geno. Sam Howell has potential. He's only into his third year. See what he can do.
I disagree that he would be competing
and you
with
get
Geno,
him for cheap.
But it's depth.
I think Sam Howell there can compete with him. Sam Howell did have a solid year with worse weapons. He has a lot better weapons at his disposal in Seattle. Maybe better play calling to a degree. It was iffy. The coaching in Washington wasn't great. We'll see what Seattle's offense is like with Mike McDaniel as their head coach. I mean, Mike McDonald. I said that wrong. Mike McDonald. We'll see how their team is, their offensive coordinator. I'm not sure who their offensive coordinator is, but interested to see how Sam Howell works out there. It's an interesting deal. You get him for cheap, bring him in, see what he can do in a different environment with better weapons. Moving on to the Bucs. Nothing major except for re-signing Mike Evans.
Which that was major.
I don't consider like the re-signing like major. Like when I say major, I'm saying like free agents.
If Mike Evans went elsewhere, we would be calling it major. But all right.
Yeah.
And Baker Mayfield, haven't even mentioned him yet.
That's a big signing for the Bucs. Like bringing back Baker, big re-signing. Baker had a good year there, rejuvenated his career, revitalized his career. In terms of just like free agents, right here, nothing that stands out really. Jordan Whitehead, solid move. Nothing major out of free agents, but made some good re-signings in Baker Mayfield, Levante David, Mike Evans. They released Shaq Barrett, franchise tag Antoine Winfield. We'll see what happens with Antoine Winfield.
It's about the retention for them.
Solid moves bringing them guys back. They're going to need to get younger on the defensive side of the ball. That's where their focus is probably going to be in the draft. They're more of a team that's focused on the draft than free agency because they're trying to get where they can compete for a Super Bowl within like 2 years because they still got a solid roster, solid weapons, but they got work to do. Moving on to the Titans, we talked about them to a degree, or one of their players to a degree already. Tony Pollard's a solid signing for them. Doesn't move the needle for me as a running back. I think you need him with a pair like a Zeke Elliott type of running back. You just got to pair him with someone. He's got to be your
it's a little expensive
lightning.
if not. Yeah.
He's got to be the lightning to your thunder. You got to have a thunder, like a bruiser back, so Pollard could come in and be the change of pace. He's not a lead back, I think. And then Calvin Ridley, 4 years, $92 million. I guess that's going rate now. But that reset the market. Like, that's going to force Devontae Smith or whatever. People like Devontae Smith to be 27 million range. May have been 25 before. That's going to up like a Devontae Smith to 27 million. I think that was
a bumpy career. So, yeah.
$23 million a year for Calvin Ridley. And they weren't willing to pay A.J. Brown that. That's kind of funny to me. It's another one of those front offices that are futile to a degree. Organizations that are futile to a degree. They're just like a middling organization. Nothing horrible, nothing great.
Yeah,
that they just seem to always make wrong moves to a degree.
And they need Levis to pan out and elevate them.
Levis has potential, nothing spectacular, but I'm interested to see what he can do there. Lloyd Cushenberry, bringing him in as a safety, that's actually a really good move for them. Chidobe Awuzie is a good move. Kenneth Murray hasn't really panned out, but solid move. I'm a fan of their draft, or not draft, free agency. To a degree. Then the Commanders, they went on a like signing or a splurge to say the least. I want to know your thoughts on this. It seems like they're just trying to build a 2019 dream team.
Well, yeah, maybe so. Yeah, some of these are a bit of throwbacks. There are Panthers people who were sad to lose Frankie Louvu at linebacker. So having Louvu at 3-year deal is interesting. Yeah, but guys like Zach Ertz at tight end to fill back in for Logan Thomas. Ertz is definitely at the back end of the career. Safety Jeremy Chin's a name I recognize and I think is kind of intriguing on a 1-year basis. Bobby Wagner 1 year as well as a bigger name. Cleveland Farrell, who was a pretty high pick if my memory is right.
I think 2019 first round pick probably.
Yeah, so there's your
2019 dream team.
Yeah. But
Eckler
losing Antonio Gibson, but getting Austin Eckler at running back is pretty nifty. Eckler with Jaden Daniels, assuming that the draft winds up with Jaden Daniels going to the Commanders. That's interesting to me. And that will be, I think, fun to witness.
And then Bobby Wagner, like that's another just 2019 dream. Like he had a great year this past year. I believe he was actually an All-Pro, if I'm not mistaken. But he's also probably going to be on the downside of his career very soon. Marcus Mariota.
Mariota will be a
seems
great
like
mentor
you're bringing
to Jane Daniels.
Yep. Seems like they're bringing in a lot of names that are bigger to a degree. Might not be the best, but they're bringing in a lot of just people off of name value, it seems like, to a degree. Like the Zach Ertz, like, what does bringing him in do? He's on the downside of his career, does almost nothing nowadays.
Well, it's not like the cost is going to be through the roof then.
Probably $2 million.
If the cost is proportional, then you're not going to crush it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's a solid offseason. They went on a spending splurge or whatever. Signed a lot of people. See if any of them work out. A lot of 2-3-year deals, though, which I'm a fan of when teams do the 2-3-year deals instead of 1-year deals. 1-year deals, you just get stuck eventually, like the Eagles did at certain points with previous teams. When they won the Super Bowl in 2017, a reference to the Eagles, it was all like 1-year deals. So then you had a drop off in following years. When you're signing players or people to 2-3-year deals, it helps you build more long term for the future. They signed a guard for 3 years. Nick Allegretti brought in Tyler Biadasz for $30 million 3 years. That's a good signing. Frankie Louvu, like you mentioned, they've made some solid signings. I'm gonna be interesting for Washington, especially with Jaden Daniels there. Are automatically the third best QB in the division. I'd put him ahead of Daniel Jones. Except Daniel Jones might not even be a quarterback in the division shortly. JJ McCarthy might be there. Since we ran a little late, we're about to wrap up today. I want to ask you, since I know you're tuned in a lot on college, if you had to predict the top 5 in the NFL draft right now, what would it be? I think it's locked. I think it's almost locked in.
Yeah. Let me pull up the draft order just so that I can get my things situated here. Want to make sure I don't get the inaccuracy of this situation. All right. So we need. I'm just looking for the order is all okay. Number 1 with the Bears will be Caleb Williams, quarterback from USC. Number 2 will be Jaden Daniels to the Washington Commanders, the quarterback from LSU. The Patriots will go with Drake May, the quarterback from North Carolina, at number 3.
I agree with that. I think that's one of the shake-up spots, though. It could be one of those, like, draft, like, because there's always a QB who rises late.
Yeah, this is just what I have now.
That could be a JJ spot.
Yeah, the Cardinals at 4 look at wide receivers, probably right with the talent overall. You look at what would be best available, and you'd probably say Marvin Harrison Jr., so that's my spot there. And then the Chargers, like we talked about, Malik Neighbors, wide receiver from LSU.
Yeah.
So I think we're in alignment, right?
It just feels like for the top 5 of this draft, it just feels like a sure thing for almost every pick, except for 3. 3 could be JJ eventually. JJ could slide into that spot. Just there's always that one QB who rises late in the draft process and one QB who falls late. And that seems like the spot that it could be.
I agree.
But I've never seen like a top 5 of a draft so like set. Like this the top 5 of this draft coming up just seems almost locked in.
Well, it could be a little early to say that, but we have our ideas. We have our conceptions of what could occur. That's for sure.
Like you look at any mock draft, I guarantee that's what most mock drafts are going to be for the next month and a half.
Making too many hot takes
until the draft. It was nice having you on this episode. Some interesting moves in free agency. I was going to do a Luke's list. I'm going to postpone that and actually put it on TikTok. I'll actually show it on the screen and then I'll talk about it on TikTok though as we wrap up. I was gonna do way too early. Oh wait, that's wrong. By the way, it's biggest free agency signings.
There's nothing that's too early about this. Yeah,
that was gonna be when I wrote that. See, I'm out of it today, but when I wrote that, I was gonna do like way too early top 5 like NFL teams, like a power rankings. And then I forgot to change it, but Justin Fields to the Steelers, Barkley to the Eagles, Keenan to the Bears, King Henry to the Ravens, Cousins to the Falcons. I'll talk about that on TikTok. You can tune in on there and see that.
Yeah.
But that'll do it for this episode of Uncaged Sports Talk. You can tune in and see why I think those moves are the biggest moves in free agency so far. Thank you for coming on. It was nice having you on.
Great to see you, Luke. Yes, sir.
Ran late today on this episode, but a lot of moves in free agency had to discuss. Thanks for coming on. That'll do it for this episode of Uncaged Sports Talk. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe on all of our platforms.